What up, YouTube? Fiercely on here, and this is the start of my new series that I'm planning on bringing to you guys. I haven't quite settled on a name, but I think I'm going to go with low sodium reviews uh, because most of what I intend to do in these videos is talk about games that I'm interested in or have played some, beaten probably, and just talk about them in a way that's not super judgmental or toxic and try to just shine a light on them, talk about what they are, and minimize the overall really strong sentiments across like some people will immediately jump down a game's throat because it's not a 10 out of 10 game, and some people will immediately glaze a game because it's specifically hitting all of their little notes. I'm going to try to be as objective as possible. Obviously these are games that I'm already interested in, so there's it's hard to fully decouple your um, personal biases, but I'm going to try to do that as much as possible and just talk about games in general from just a pure review standpoint and give you guys a recommendation on whether or not I think you should buy it, play it, give it a go if it's on sale or whatever that might be. I also intend to try and more so normalize or kind of bring about the idea that not every game needs to be a 10 out of 10, and games that are 7 out of 10, even 6s out of 10, stuff like that, are still worth giving a try, giving a shot, because maybe for me this game is only a 5 or 6 out of 10. I was like, yeah, I liked it, but it wasn't like something that I was really going for, really super into. But that doesn't mean that someone else might not end up, it might not be an, or it might be end up being in like an 8 out of 10 for them or something. So, and I think that a lot of times in the modern time, we tend to undervalue things that are anything below like a 9 or an 8. But we only really appreciate those 9s and 10s because there are the 7s and 8s and 6s out there. Even though we like them, they're not as good as our 10s. So, but anyway, that's the main pick of this series. The first episode is going to be about the Beast of Reincarnation, a game that, as far as I'm aware, I try not to let the internet influence my own opinions. They pretty much don't, but I try not to look at them too much just because a it's either, like I said, full glazing or just so much um, like negativity and like outward speaking towards mediocrity that you can't really get a real sentiment out of anybody. Um, and B, I want to give you guys my impressions and my feelings and my review on the game, and I need to do that from the most authentic, hmm, excuse me, the most authentic place that I can, which is me and my own opinions. Speaking of authenticity, as I'm sure you guys have started to notice, this series is going to be another attempt at videos where I don't edit too much. I might edit here and there, but for the most part, I'm not planning on editing too much. I want it to feel as natural as possible, and it's it's a point for me to learn how to get better at talking to this damn camera. So strap in because hopefully it gets better along the way. Maybe episode 1 will be rough, but episode 20 will be better. Um, but so I just wanted to start with a couple of things. I have a small list of like punchline notes basically to go over, but for the most part, it's just gonna be me rambling. You guys can put me on in the background or whatever. I am gonna leave certain um certain sections to where I let parts of the gameplay show up in the background. I don't have a lot of gameplay to show, just because I didn't want to spoil anything for anybody that might be interested in the story and things like that. I have like some of the opening cutscenes and stuff from like, yeah, I press like start game and then boom, this is what it starts with. But other than that, I try not to show too much in this particular one because I think that there are some interesting. Um, th- I guess one of my first points is the story. I think that there's a lot of interesting little mysteries that is kind of presented and some interesting like discussion pieces that are there. And I wouldn't want to spoil or ruin that experience for anybody else for the first time that they go. But my first impression of the game actually was I wasn't too keen on it. I'm not like super into I love action games, I love RPG games, I love the Souls games, and I love a lot of I love most games. I do love gaming in general, but there's a lot of games that I feel like are very samey these days after the advent of like Dark Souls and, you know, God of War. A lot of these games really started exploding in popularity, to where even games like the or series like Final Fantasy, who used to be, the premier like turn-based RPGs, don't even do turn-based RPGs anymore. I am excited for Final Fantasy Resonance, but that's not today's video. We'll talk about in October when it comes out. But no, so my first impressions of this game were not super strong. I wasn't that interested, but I was at least mildly interested because I was like, oh, this is being made by Game Freak. Uh, People who know Game Freak know that they are the pilots behind Pokemon, the biggest, most successful IP on the face of the planet. So it's interesting to see them step out of their box a little bit and see something else. Beast of Reincarnation came out on pretty much every major platform except for the Switch, interestingly enough. I think it looks pretty good. I think, like, graphically speaking, it looks pretty impressive. It's not like the most impressive game of all time, but considering how often people meme and try to dunk on Pokemon in recent years, and then seeing this game be pumped out, I mean, that kind of just tells you right there that whatever it is that the Pokemon company, Nintendo, whoever's really in charge in that whole amalgamation, um, they're clearly doing whatever they're doing to kind of hinder, or not hinder in like a negative. Yeah, it is hinder in a negative way, but like not hinder in a way that like the Pokemon games are still successful. We're just not getting a full budget, full like triple A, quote unquote triple A, because what even is triple A these days? Whenever we've got bangers like, you know, Baldur's Gate and Expedition coming out that were largely made by small teams or like semi-established teams, but new people with low budgets compared to the Ubisofts and the EAs of the world. But so my first impressions weren't super interested in the game, mostly because I was like, man, is this just going to be another Soulsborne game or another, you know, um, Final Fantasy 15 or whatever, one of these action RPG games that is just so similar. And it kind of is, but it's different in a way that isn't like immediate. Like I was still willing to put my hands in the game. And I think that in and of itself is worth talking about because, like I said, at first I wasn't super interested. I was like, well, I might be interested just to see what they do. What does Game Freak have in store for a game of this genre? So I ended up deciding in like about a month, like right up close to the thing. And I was like, you know what? I think I am going to buy this. I'm going to give it a shot. I liked some of the early gameplay showcases. I was surprised that they went with like a more almost like a Sekiro style, where it's like more parries, but it's a lot more forgiving, even more so than E33 compared to Sekiro. Um, but what is interesting is I got bodied a couple of times, by just some normal enemies because I was like, oh, they're going with more of like like a hack and slash kind of a game. You can just kind of like button mash. No, you button mash, you will get clobbered. Maybe not by like basic goon 1 and basic goon 3, but the first elite enemy, I thought, oh, okay, it's just going to be like a bigger one with slightly more health points, and I'll smack this guy around pretty quickly, no big deal. Nope. I didn't die to the very first guy, but I got very close because I thought, mashing R1 over and over and over again was going to just be what it needed to be. So I was impressed, by how they were able to make a game out of their comfort zone, I would say, and make it very fluid. The gameplay itself is largely fun. Interacting with Ku and all that stuff. There's a couple of things that I do have as like a quote unquote negatives, but they're not like super big. I think my biggest negative is almost there's way too much chatter. Like even though there's not a lot of like conversations going on, the main character or the dog will bark, or the main character will say "over there, coo" and stuff like that, and it's nice hearing her, but it's almost every 10 steps or every 5 steps. um, I wish you could lower the chatter a little bit. It kind of reminds me of, and I'm a Dragon's Dogma fan, but it kind of reminds me of Dragon's Dogma whenever people used to bitch and moan that the pawns, Hoppies, Hoppy, they would just talk way too much. And like, can we turn that down? That would be a nice little slider for this game to have, I think. Um, but yeah, the performance of the game, like as far as how fluid the animations are, how responsive the buttons are, and the animations happening on screen, I think all that feels mostly good to me. I don't think I really have any issues. It was a little bit of a learning curve because you can't instantly parry out of any like attack animation. So like if you're spamming R1 1,000 times, you can't hit the other button to get yourself out of it, which is probably for the better. But it did at first like irritate me. I was like, "What the hell? Why am I not doing the thing?" And it's because I was just mashing R1 like a fool. Um, but yeah, I think overall, other than like the literal learning curve of how like learning what is allowed and what is not allowed, I think was pretty. The game is pretty responsive in that way. Um, Stealth is really good in the game. You can stealth kill, like one hit kill with like most basic enemies, and like elites probably like half health, and then like I don't think I've been able to do it to any bosses specifically, and if I did, it would probably only be like a small chunk. I can't think of any bosses off the top of my head that I was able to assassinate. But there are a couple of elite enemies that you can assassinate, and it chunks off like half their health, so that's pretty cool. The next thing I'd like to talk about is the design of the game. I think that the design of the game is pretty interesting. I really like the whole nature is overtaking the world in certain ways. A lot of where you go, a lot of locations, like one of the first locations that you go to is literally Kanto. Spoilers. I mean, it's the first zone that you go to, and then another zone has like a street sign that says Shibuya on it. So it's clearly in Japan, similar to how the Pokemon games are based on Japan regions for the most part. There's a couple of outliers. But the interesting part is that it's so far in the future that nature has started to start taking over again. Um, and there's a little bit of um, not just creatures like the wolf or deer and things like this. There's like wood and like flowers and fauna. No, flora. Fauna is the creatures. Flora is the vegetation coming off of them, and it's really interesting to see those character designs. Um, whenever you see them for the first time, you're like, oh, that's cool. Like I got to see, a deer with like the bark for antlers or like hooves and things like this. So I thought that the design of the characters and the creatures were really cool. I think that the story, which I mentioned earlier, was really interesting. Some people I've seen online have this like negative sentiment around the dialogue in the game, but I'll um I'll let you guys, like I said, in the video, in the background of the video, I've had probably the game go on, but I might like cut in here really quick.
Emotions only hinder us. That is why humanity sought to divest themselves of them. They chose to free themselves of the burden of feeling. They chose to evolve. However, fragments of those bottled emotions buried themselves deep into their souls, and those souls began to rot. Even now, after most of humanity is gone, those souls continue to deteriorate.
and say like this like section of the game is like a piece of the puzzle that people are clearly not paying attention to. I mean, it's not like I'm in their conversations. I'm not paying attention too much because, like I said, I don't want to like color my impression too harshly from other people being negative. But like people saying that the cutscenes seem very bland and the writing and dialogue seems very dull, like you're missing the point because the whole purpose of this future is that humans have decided to cast away emotions. There's a dialogue in the pretty early in the game where the main character is talking to a younger character and she's like, "Well, what would you do if you had freedom?" And she's like, "What's that?" She didn't even understand the concept of being free. So, I think that there's a deeper dialogue there to be had about the universe that they live in and the reality that they have, that they've cast away their emotions as humans. Like one the line is literally they chose to evolve and cast away their emotions because they don't think that emotions are necessary. And a lot of the Mechatron type enemies that you encounter are not even just the enemies. Some of the ones that you can talk to are considered human. They talk about how the humans have clearly turned into these mechanical androids of some kind. Like I said, I don't want to get too deep and too spoilery, so I'm mostly talking about stuff that you can discover in the first like 2 to 3 hours of the game. But like, I feel like whenever people say things like that on the internet, it almost or even if you were to tell me like face to face, I would still tell you like I feel like you're not paying attention to the game. Or you've only scratched the surface and you're not really fully understanding the breadth of the game. Because I do think that there's some interesting lore and world building that they do very, very early on. It's just one of those games that you have to kind of pay attention to it. And if you're not paying attention to it, you might just be like, oh, it's just another Soulsborne like, another, of these action RPGs that are that it's kind of like lukewarm, whatever. I don't care. So, but I don't know. I think that it's a pretty solid game. One of my notes I have is about the value of the game. I think the game sells for 50 or like maybe it's 59.99 for the base version, which is pretty much like $10 below standard. Like most games come out at like 69.99 now. Maybe it's even 49.99. I don't remember off the top of my head. It might even be like just a $50 game. And from what I've seen online, people are saying you can beat the main campaign in 30 to 40 hours. So excuse me, that's fair. I think that the game is pretty fun and a good measurement of like a good test of whether a game is worth your time or not is was the game equal in dollar value to what you had fun per hour? And a general baseline I usually go with is $1 per hour. If a game is $60, did I play it for 60 hours and did I have fun for those 60 hours? Most games that I play do end up being in that, like, they do fall into that range of being worth. Some games far exceed their cost per dollar if we're doing it by that strict number. And some far undergo, but I still enjoyed playing them. Like one of my favorite games a couple years ago was Wizard with a Gun. I think I only really played that game for maybe like 10 hours or something like that. I platinumed it to beat everything, and I think the game was like $20. So that's like twice the value or twice the cost of what my baseline is. But I had a lot of fun with that game. That game was awesome. I would love to play uh, like a sequel or a DLC to that game at some point because I thought it was a lot of fun. Wizard with the Gun was cool. But again, I keep sidetracking. I guess this is the comparison section of the video, kind of. Since we're on the comparison section, I will say, as far as like the story goes, it gives me not in no way am I saying this is like equal in the way that it is, but it gives me notes of like an Expedition 33, how I was engaged the whole time. I was like, oh man, I want to see the next like I want to discover the next secret. I want to see the next thing that happens because I'm invested in the world that they have built, and I'm interested in seeing how the rest of it manifests as a whole. Excuse me. And I'm not, again, I think that E33 was like a generational game. I'm not saying that Beast of Reincarnation is a generational level game, not even from the story standpoint, but I do think that there are a lot of cool, interesting things that happened during my playthrough where I was like, oh man, I want to know what's going on with this character. I want to know what's going on with that thing. There's just like a lot of things going on that I found myself being drawn in. Like, oh man, this is like cool. Like whether it's a mystery or whether it's just like I want to know what happens next. I was down to clown. As far as gameplay wise, I mean, the closest one would definitely be something like Dark Souls, Sekiro, Bloodborne, these types of games. It is slightly more difficult than your standard hack and slash type of game. Um, the parry system is more important the longer you go, I would say. Like certain enemies have parrying specific attacks or like dodge specific attacks. But then you also get pretty strong as you level. Like the game allows you to feel like that power fantasy. It lets you fill out that power fantasy pretty well, especially if you're willing to grind. There's no, um, at least not that I've seen. There's no, oh, you didn't beat the game at level one. Ugh, what a loser type of mentality quite yet. Maybe that'll come later, but not currently. And then, like I said, I think that for the value, for the money that I paid for it, I think that I got my value out of it from my first game or my first playthrough. And I do think that it might be a game that would even be worth platinuming. I don't think it would. I don't remember any of the I don't remember any of the missing trophies that I have off the top of my head, but I don't remember any of them being egregiously difficult. I might be missing one or two, but um, but yeah, that's most of my notes. I'm trying to think if there's anything else that's really important to discuss. I don't think so. I don't think I have any like really strict things. Most people like doing these like tier lists or these oh, rank it out of 10 or whatever. But I mentioned earlier that I do believe that there is value in anything that's you, I don't know where I'm going how I'm going to list these yet. I might have a an update, maybe a little short, or maybe just as I do more of these, I'll kind of figure out like a tier list of maybe games of 2026. Do a tier list of what I think games that I played in 2026 are. But I've tried to think of it like this: 10 and nines are like must buy. Like from these are my recommendations, right? So from a 9 or 10 from me would be a must buy. A 7, 8, and 9, or sorry, a 7 and an 8 would be a buy it if it's like be willing to try to buy it or like buy it if it's on sale because I still think it's a really good game and you should probably try it. Um, 5 and 6 might be see if you have a friend that'll let you borrow it or rent or PlayStation puts out games for free on their catalog all the time, so just wait for it to come on there. Or is still maybe if there's a really good sale like on Black Friday and it's like 40% off, maybe that's it. And these are all assuming that you have no interest in buying it beforehand or very little interest and you're just looking for someone on the internet to give you a suggestion. I'm just one random dude. I'm not a big deal, but yeah, I think that 8 or 9s would be my must buys. 7 or 8s would be my yeah, they're probably worth trying or just waiting for a sale. 5s and 6s are, maybe try to get them for free in some way or for like a good sale. Um, and then anything below 5 would be not necessarily that they're bad, just that you would need to do more research or more something other than just my opinion should probably be like seek a second opinion or if it's free, if a game is free and you have even the most mild interest in it, I say try it. That's a blanket statement for all things. who knows? Maybe you'll find a really cool game out there that really interests you. But sorry, guys, I rambled on a lot longer than I intended to. But maybe I'll have more insights on how I want to do these videos in the future. For now, this is all I got. If you guys have any comments or questions, leave them in the doobly doo thing down below. Um, and yeah, thanks for watching. Peace.